Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Kislev in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires and what Creative Assembly should do to improve them, because we know those improvements are coming. There's quite a lot of things that need to be done with respect to Kislev, and of course a lot of things to be done with Tzeentch as well. Tzeentch, Kislev, and Cafe are going to be the first three races that are going to be touched on by Creative Assembly this summer. When that will be, we don't know. July, August, unlikely that it will be June. If it was June, we would have known by now, suffice it to say. But when we're looking at Kislev, here's the first thing that really needs to be improved for them. Kislev itself, not in terms of the race, but in terms of the terrain of Kislev. Kislev plainly sucks. It's one of the worst campaign areas of the game. And it's not just for Kislev as a race, it's for everyone else. If you're playing Fraught, who I've beaten over here in this campaign, if you're playing Fraught, the worst thing you can do in this campaign is actually take over Kislev. It isn't worth it. The big cities aren't worth it. The smaller provinces aren't worth it. Having these kind of two settlement provinces without a provincial capital is just a waste of time, money, and resources. The best thing you can do if you're playing as Kislev, even as Kislev, or within this area, is take the territory, sure, defeat the enemies, get money, loot, sack them, etc., but then sell them to another faction. That's the most use you're going to have out of Kislev. So this needs to be remade. In what way? That's a different discussion. Adding more settlements, I don't think would work given the way the terrain is, though you could potentially add one, maybe two at most settlements. But the problem is the way it's structured. So you have the big cities of Erengrad, Prague, and Kislev itself in their own provinces. And then you have the Southern Oblast, the Western Oblast, Troll Country, and the Eastern Oblast. What I think should be done to some extent or another is you should get bigger provinces, because they would actually be more useful if you, say, had Erengrad in a bigger province that also included Alexandrinov and Zoshinsk over here. Basically, if you included the Western Oblast into a province with Erengrad, that would be better. For the most part, there will be downsides like less commandments, less atamans. Of course, given the way Kislev currently works, less recruitment, but overall it would increase their economic potential and even unit recruitment potential in some ways. That would work. But I think if you're going to do that, then if Creative Assembly is going to do that, then they also need to reconsider the major cities themselves and how they work. Because right now, they're not really that great as cities. Like, you do get a bunch of structures over here that can be pretty useful, but maybe you could just, take the tribal encampment and merge it together with the Tallow Keepers Guild and have a mega structure that does both of those things at the same time, instead of having two different growth buildings, because you're mainly going to get these for the growth. Though, of course, the Orthodox churches would be pretty good, but what the Kislev cities do is they don't really generate enough income to actually be worth it. Consider this. You would need to spend a fortune to just generate 1,200 income from a city. And because it's only one settlement, any other province that you may get will actually end up generating more income. Unless it's like a province like Helpit. But, Helpit in itself has its own issues, unless you're Skaven, because obviously the major building slots that you have in Helpit absolutely make it worth it for Skaven, but that's the exception. Maybe having more building slots, and also, like, if they want to maintain these single city provinces, maybe what they could do to make them more worth it is add some things like the trade quorum going into caravans in the big cities. Like, the number of slots they have is okay, but they could obviously increase their economic potential even further. Those would be just some ideas. The big problem, though, for Kislev, one of the big problems, is their economy. As in, the buildings they built for economy are really expensive. Like, if we look at the Southern Oblast over here, because obviously Helpit is unsuitable, so it's not a good example. Like, looking at Fort Jakova, it costs you, even for Fort Jakova, it costs you 1,300 for a structure that just generates 100 income. That is pathetic. What Kislev needs, maybe remove the number of tiers over here. Like, just have 3 tiers for the trade quorum, and have all the way to caravans to tier 3. That's what I do, like, reduce the cost, reduce the tiers for their economic building, so that Kislev has the economic potential to work with. Hell, you could decide not to even change the way these provinces work if Kislev could actually build all the way to caravans at tier 3 as opposed to tier 5 as it currently is. That would vastly increase their economic potential. That's one of the problems. Let's talk about unit roster issues. Gunpowder units still suck. So Streltsy, which are one of the main range unit that you want to aim for, they're not really going to be that great. There's a reason why people have been using heavy war sleds. Now, in a lot of ways, the roster is actually okay. Kossars and Kossars with spears do a pretty solid job. Though they're a bit too expensive for actually what they're offering, considering the fact that Goblin Archers might win a ranged engagement with these guys, given the greenskin benefits that they get in their campaign. Yeah, it's not exactly a great situation to have. And here's the thing, you actually have a benefit, the Buy Our Blood, which makes it really annoying to fight these guys when you're fighting against AI, but it's not so much of a major benefit when you're playing with these guys, because getting these units unbreakable may actually get them killed as an entire unit. That's what I think with respect to that. And a lot of these hybrid units just don't work that well. Like, maybe some cost reductions and a campaign upkeep reductions would be very much warranted for some of these units, considering their strength. Don't get me wrong, armored Kossars with gray weapons or just regular armored Kossars are pretty decent units. The cavalry arm of Kislev, the entire cavalry chain of Kislev is bloody useless. You never benefit from getting any of the units here. Absolutely none at all. Because the only unit that's even decent are the wing lancers. Like, oh, horse archers can be decent. Not in a world where you have light war sleds. Yes, it's a higher tier, but in a world where you have light war sleds available and they're a much, much better unit. Sure, they're more expensive, they can reduce their upkeep. You have absolutely no reason to get horse archers. Dervishes, not a great unit at all. Sure, they're fast, but never something you should recruit. Also, can we get rid of dervishes and garrisons? That would be very, very welcome. But cavalry-wise, you're actually much better off building the royal barracks into a royal chapter house, or getting Prague, or getting snow leopards into war bear riders, as opposed to ever building the cavalry chain. There's no reason whatsoever to ever build the cavalry chain. To ever build the cavalry chain as Kislev. That's just some unit roster issues. The biggest issue, I would say, and one thing that Creative Assembly should give us, is an earlier version of artillery. Little Groms can get the job done pretty effectively in sieges. The problem is they're a tier 4 unit, and this is an issue the Empire also has. It's also an issue of Cafe, but Cafe can win sieges in another way. Basically, the advantage Cafe has in sieges is like, yeah, you can just spam Jade Warriors. They're a tier 1 unit, ultimately. Tier 1.5 if you want to go that far. But they're a tier 1 unit, and they'll win sieges on their own. Kislev, like Armored Kossars, you just won't be able to afford a full stack of them in your campaign, so you can't just win sieges with them. Like, leads to a really terrible siege situation where what you do is you get a lot of Kossars, you line them up beyond the walls, you kill everything inside, then maybe you move very, very slowly with your massive range units, getting a couple of them in time, killing everything inside. Kislev needs earlier game artillery, plain and simple. And this is not necessarily to say that Little Groms should be a lower tier, though maybe that wouldn't necessarily be so bad, but I think one of the things they could add in the DLC is either a way to break walls, a wall breaker unit, or an ability, an invocation from the gods to break the walls, or a tier 2 artillery. Like, give us a tier 2 version of the Toolmaker. Hell, even buff the Toolmaker. Like, let's say this could offer 15% income, 20% income, and, tier 2 would give 5% or something along those lines. Hell, maybe even a tier 1 artillery. Let's go all the way in. Let's actually have artillery available even earlier on. Speaking about unit rosters, Katrin needs a much better early game army. So does Castalton. Borisursus is really powerful with his early game army, but Castalton and Katrin especially need better early game armies. Katrin especially suffers because She has no patriarch at the start, and she has no way of getting one for quite a while. Like, it's turn 11 of this campaign, and only now am I getting close to a point of being able to actually get a patriarch, because I'm going to turn Kislev himself in tier 2, but I'm not going to get a patriarch for Kislev because it's too expensive. Instead, I'm going to wait for Jakova to be turned into a tier 2 settlement and then build a chapel. But the chapel highlights another issue: devotion. Devotion is awful. The reason it's awful is because you need it for the supporter systems, and honestly, I would just take the entire supporter system, throw it in the garbage, pretend it never was used. It worked better for Paris and Hector. The reason it worked, while yes, there was still a rush to the early level, and it's always annoying because of how the AI cheats, while there still was a rush in that system between Paris and Hector, and Paris, like if you're playing Hector, Paris will flagrantly cheat, while there's still a rush for the early level, you had plenty of reasons to engage with the system because you got a lot of rewards for it. It wasn't really that bad in Troy. It is awful with the way they did it for Kislev, because the only ways to get supporters are to invoke a god or get or spend devotion to build a lot of chapels to passively gain supporters. I think we need what we need is a better way of gaining supporters, maybe some dynamic missions constantly spawning. Though, obviously, there's pitfalls with that. You might get a grudge system 2.0 when you constantly get annoying missions. But maybe some kind of system like that where you're trying to defend the motherland, you're getting rewarded with supporters. Maybe some missions similar to what the Wood Elves have right now. Though I would not necessarily be in favor of changing Kislev into being similar to the Wood Elves, because the Wood Elves have a very defensive-oriented campaign, sure. And they only care about their big trees, the other territory is irrelevant. I would not necessarily be in favor of that, not because I don't think it wouldn't be thematic, not because I don't think it wouldn't fit Kislev, but because it's boring as dirt. Like, maybe if it was faster paced, maybe if you got more missions, maybe if you had better incentives to engage in all of that, sure. Like, right now, if you're playing a Wood Elf campaign, you curb stomp all of those events for the most part. Some of them can be annoying, sure, when you're healing the big trees, but you control that, and you have a lot of time wasted in a Wood Elf campaign, which I would not want to see a repeat of. This is not me saying the Wood Elves should be reworked, though there are certainly some things that need to be improved there, but just the pacing of it is very slow and very boring as a result of that. That particular campaign system. And the invocations themselves, the fact that the more territory you capture, the higher the cost of invocation isn't a great system. It should be a flat cost, like rights, keep the cost the same. Plain simple. That's what I think when it comes to invocations. I also feel Kislev should have more suitable terrain. Like, for instance, a wasteland should be baseline suitable for all the Kislev legendary lords. And the Chaos Waste should all be treated in the same way that the Chaos Wasteland is treated for Boris Ursus. That would help a lot in making Kislevite campaigns better, because you're supposed to be the defender against the forces of chaos. But you have absolutely no reason to go to the north if you're playing as Kislev, because it's not worth it. Yes, you do want to deal with Frat and Azazel and Trog, but once you do that, you just, let's say I'm playing Catherine, you just sell the Tower Crack to Castalton and leave him to deal with that mess while you go south and conquer the Empire. I also think that Kislev should not have a reason to go and conquer the Empire in their campaigns. They should have a reason to be the bulwark of the North, as it's thematic for them, not being the conqueror of the Empire. Because right now, and even with the DLC, even with the rework for the Empire, that wouldn't change. There's every reason in the world, if you're playing Kislev, to go conquer the Empire, like the Ostermark, Talabekland, Middenheim, Sylvania, Reichland even. There would be plenty of reasons to do that in a campaign as Kislev. It's just better territory, it buffs your economy, it's safer, etc., etc. So you're not really playing the bulwark of the North, you're more like playing the vultures of the North, who are taking advantage of the very weak state the Empire currently finds itself in. And sure, the Empire could be mega buffed, hopefully that will happen, but still, if terrain remains unsuitable, that dynamic is not going to change. And it should be a change dynamic. Also, Catra needs a melee skill line, plain and simple. Her magic tree also needs a buff, because right now her magic tree is pathetic. We saw with Drazov how you can have a really powerful hybrid melee caster lord that's good in both of them, or the Chaos Dwarves in general, because Astrogov is pretty solid in that. Like, you look at Katrin's magic tree, right? What does she gain as part of that magic tree? She has a weak Lore of Frost, which isn't the best one. And when you look at what she actually does with her Ice Mistress, she gets 1 Winds of Magic cost for Heart of Winter. 1 Winds of Magic cost for a spell that by default costs 24. Well, yeah, I'm going to reduce it to 23. Sure, if you upgrade it over here, if you upgrade it, you get to save. Now, obviously, you would reduce it probably like 19, right? Because it's like Winds of Magic cost for all spells gets reduced. But still, she needs a better skill line. A lot of her skills just don't work right now. She has a worse diplomatic benefit than Boris Ursus, which probably makes sense in a lot of ways. And yeah, a new hero choice for Kislev would be pretty good. And also, maybe a faster Ice Core training duration just in general when it comes down to it, because having to train mages for it is just pretty annoying. I mean, obviously you can abuse the load save character system. I certainly have taken advantage of it in this campaign to get myself Frost Mage in this particular campaign. Also, maybe you can decide, maybe instead of the RNG BS that currently happens right now for the Ice Court, you actually get to decide how you're going to train your lords and heroes, what traits you want to give them. That would just maybe make it more expensive, sure, but in that case, in terms of gold cost, if you do decide to choose what traits they're going to get, but you do decide what they're going to get, or you can allow it to be random and it's cheaper if you so desire. That would be my personal perspective on that, because right now, when you're training a mage, it's like playing the lottery. You might get really lucky and get something you want, in which case you should immediately save that character so you can load it up in another campaign from the very, very start of that particular campaign. I would also say that Katrin should start at the Patriarch. She needs one, or with a tier 2 Kislevite city, where she can get one very, very early on. There's no reason whatsoever. I understand what they were doing with that. It's like, yeah, obviously the conflict between herself and Kastalton, but still, it doesn't really make a lot of sense right now. And then victory conditions. Short campaign victory conditions should not require you to get 600 supporters. That is silly. That getting 600 supporters, just to give you an idea, may take you longer than actually beating the long campaign victory conditions. This is the reason why Boris Ursus is such a great legendary lord for Kislev, like why he's so far ahead of all the others, because he doesn't have to worry about any of this crap. He doesn't have to worry about the limitations on confederations in a campaign. Like, just the supporter system in itself, like, if it was completely removed and you just confederated Kastalton or Katrin diplomatically, if you're playing the other, would actually be a better system than what we currently have. Those are some ideas. What additions to the unit roster should Kislev get? That is a fairly interesting discussion. Maybe some monster units would fit in pretty well. Like, I think gunpowder units need to be improved. I think some artillery needs to be added. Absolutely. And Kislev could certainly benefit from some monster units. I mean, they do have some, but it's like the Snow Leopard is a glass cannon. The War Bear Riders, yeah, they get the job done, but they're tier 4, right? And they're pretty damn expensive for a faction that has poor economy. So, like, some cheap tier 2 monster option. Like, Greenskins have trolls. Norska has trolls. Like, you know, tier 2 or maybe tier 3 monster option would actually work pretty well in a Kislev campaign. Would help complete their roster. Hero-wise, that is a completely different discussion. Don't necessarily have any strong opinions. Though I think like what Kislev really needs is just a better way of being able to increase Frostmaiden capacity in their campaign and just being able to compete to their opponents. Because as it stands right now, all of their opponents just sweep the floor with them. Like if you're Skaven, you wipe the floor with Kislev. If you're Azazel, they don't stand a chance. Norska, easily defeats them. I mean, it can be complicated when, you know, Kislev, like Catherine, gets two or three stacks when controlled by the Ion Legendary and throws 3 stacks of Cossars against you. That can be obviously an issue, but that would be an issue with any faction, with any army. In general, just Kislev is a very, very easy faction to deal with, and they're not really a major problem because of limited economy, you know, issues of roster. I mean, realistically, if you're playing a Kislev campaign, for a lot of that early game, you're just going to be recruiting regular Cossars, not even armor Cossars, because you're going to struggle to afford them. I mean, at this point, I have a lot of money. Sure, I do, but I wiped Fraught. That's the reason I have a lot of money. And it was certainly not an easy fight, and he's caused me a lot of issues right now with that lovely plague he unleashed as a final middle finger towards us. Like, he just did it in the last moment when I was just about to wipe him out. Fun experience. Yeah, the terrain needs to be improved, the unit roster needs to be improved, the economy needs to be improved, and we need to have a reason to actually care about defending Kislev. Because right now, you don't care about defending Kislev. You only care about keeping the free cities for the landmarks. We need to have better ways of getting devotion from more enemy types. Like, there's no reason we shouldn't get devotion from fighting the forces of the disorder. Like, we should get devotion from fighting Greenskins, we should get devotion from fighting the Vampire Counts, we should get devotion from fighting Skaven. Not just the quote-unquote chaos factions, but more factions. You shouldn't get devotion for fighting the Empire, as an example, right? That would give you a further reason not to fight the Empire, which is silly. It's just ridiculous for Kislev to fight the Empire. I mean, obviously there's silliness in the game, like Tyrion and Alariel always going to war with Safri. That's silly enough. Kislev going on a grand crusade against the Empire, that is ridiculous. Costine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, enable notifications. Stay tuned for more.